All right, I want to take a step away from the book here for a second to open this up to like a bigger beyond media issue that is out here. Because I was thinking about all of this is so crazy to me, and I'm a lot of times instinctively think to like talk to my dad about it. And it occurred to me, like, how the fuck could I have possibly understood the gravity of any of this? Where in my schooling could I learn this? And so there was a little bit of a lightning bolt moment that education is equally problematic in our understanding and interpretation of the world, because you could do an entire class, you could spend an entire year teaching about these 10 years, the background, the war, and sort of maybe 20 years, the aftermath. You could do an entire class and still not really totally capture everything about this. Just on the Vietnam War. And I know, and don't get me wrong, I understand there's limited time. You have to somewhat prioritize the points that you focus on, because school has to capture human existence up until now, right? But then I think about like history classes, fucking like there's no room for diving into this level of detail. You have you have world history, which is one class taking you from the beginning of civilization to today. You, at the very best, you get to summarize the main things that happen for every 100 years. I don't think that there's a ton of value in doing that, honestly. I think it would be far better to just limit this a little bit more, or you got to expand the history curriculum. And again, this kind of goes back to an idea that I had in reading Euclid's Window, and some other things. Like, why do we not bake the mathematical history into math? Because that's how it would have helped me understand, if I learned about Pythagoras being an ancient hippie, and being more of like a philosopher than a mathematician, right? And I'm thinking also structurally, I don't totally recall like what elementary school experience was like, but in middle school, right, it's kind of the first time that you're separating learning into these disciplines with specialized teachers and everything, right? And so you have social studies, but at least when I was in school, that encompassed such a general, broad range of topics that, right? So it wasn't just history, right? It was also geography and, culture and whatever, stuff like that. And so in sixth grade, you're learning about geographically where countries are, and you're only really extremely high level, like one sentence summary understanding of each of those places as you're learning where they are on the map. And then 7th grade, we had a little bit more of a U.S. leaning. Do they call it civics by that point? No, civics wasn't until high school. But you're learning about the U.S. a little bit more. We did our American Icon project in that time. Don't remember broadly what that class was about, though. 8th grade was an introduction to the better version of history, which is, but then also you're tasked with the challenge of it's the branches of government, like structures of government. Different countries have different governments. And 8th grade, there was also this weird, like modern culture angle to it. Like, we're going to teach you about modern social studies, social trends and things like that. And I think in 8th grade, there was a little bit like learning how to do research was kind of the thing. And then you hit freshman year, that was civics. That was primarily U.S. government, understanding the structure of the government, the functions, learning about Congress, Senate, laws, the Constitution, things like that. Probably the best version of this, because it was focused on U.S. government basically, and we spent the entire year and we could dive into the details a little bit more. And then 10th grade was interdisciplinary literature and social studies, history, but it was world history. We did the entire world history in a year, and then you don't come back to it. After that, it's again AP US history, which basically again becomes one of the, like, you focus on the wars. And so if we were doing trimesters, you could basically look at it as first trimester American Revolution, second trimester the World Wars, both of them in one trimester. Again, could do an entire year just on one of those wars, and that's probably not even enough. And then like post World War II to modern day was after that, to wrap up the year. And then what, 12th grade, not required to have history. That was then replaced by economics for part of the year and another one. Not another one. Right, so and last point on all of that too is never once throughout that entire time was the U.S. directly it was never once stated throughout that entire time that the U.S. did something bad. They would sidestep around it sometimes if they were someone who was aware, who was privy to the information. But that was also telling that nobody could directly say, Vietnam was, we terrorized Vietnam. It was basically just teed up as a controversial conflict and like the only war that the US has lost. But of course, we were still fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan at that point. So it was really hard to be anti-war. But even now that we have the distance from that, we can see that our initial response to that was terrible as well. So anyway.